Fantastic episode for you today. We are going to hear from a West Virginia hiker who sent in actual pictures of his encounter. Then we have a very special guest, Josh from What Lurks Beneath, who is going to share a group of missionaries' experience with something very strange. But before we get into the stories, if you're digging the content and haven't subscribed, let me be the first to say, welcome aboard. Now let's get to the stories. Hi Donovan. I found your channel a few months ago, and I really enjoy your content. I've been listening to quite a few channels like yours over the years, especially since I had my encounter. I always wanted to send it in, but I was just too lazy to actually put it together. Well, that and having the time to sit down and write it all out hasn't really been a priority. I'm always so busy with work. I've always been interested in the paranormal, and I've had an encounter myself. My encounter isn't like a lot of the other ones I see or hear online. It's not that it's too crazy or anything, it's just that I have actual proof, as you will see from the pictures. I've attached them to this email. Before anyone says anything, please remember, this is a zoomed in photo from an iPhone 6 in the woods of West Virginia. Anyways, my encounter happened in 2017 in the mountains of West Virginia. It is really true what they say about West Virginia. It's wild and wonderful. Just a little background on me. I'm one of the managers at a local Walmart here in West Virginia. I'd rather not say what town I'm from since I still work here and I'm sending in some actual pictures of my encounter. I don't know, I just don't want people bothering me about it and knowing who I am. Sorry if that seems weird. So I would appreciate it if you keep my name and email address anonymous. I grew up in West Virginia, and I've always loved hiking and camping in the Appalachian Mountains. I've been doing it since I was a kid. My dad used to take me and my brothers camping all of the time. It was one of our favorite things to do together. Well, I'm 31 now, and I still love to hike and camp. I try to go at least several times a year. I usually go with my friends and my brothers, but sometimes I'll go by myself. I like to get away from everything and just enjoy nature. My job is pretty stressful since we're always crazy busy at Walmart. I work a lot, and sometimes I just need to decompress. When I do go solo camping, it's been so relaxing. I don't mind being by myself or left to my own thoughts. I actually talk to myself quite a bit. I know that might seem strange, but let's just say I'm totally fine by myself. Actually, one of my favorite shows is Alone on the History Channel. I started getting into bushcraft after watching that show. I have a spot that I've been going to since I was a kid that's about an hour's hike from the nearest road in the Appalachian Mountains. It's in a really remote part of the state, and I've never seen another person when I'm there. It's one of my favorite places in the world. Back in August of 2017, I was planning a solo trip for 2 nights at my favorite spot. I brought enough food for 3 or 4 days just in case I wanted to stay longer. I hiked in on Friday and set up my camp. I spent the rest of the daylight hours exploring the area and just relaxing. I didn't see or hear anything out of the ordinary. Not that I was looking for anything, but I need to mention it because you'll find out why in just a minute. That night I went to bed early since I wanted to get an early start the next day. I was planning on doing some hiking and I was so tired from working a half a day and then hiking all the way out to my favorite spot. That night I was woken up in the middle of the night by a loud noise. It sounded like something was running through the woods. I sat up in my tent to listen, but I didn't hear anything else. I figured it was just an animal and I went back to sleep. I've had a few black bear encounters while I've been camping here, and it's kinda scary, but usually they go away with any noise that you make. Plus, I always carry bear spray with me and my snub-nosed 357. I was woken up again a few hours later by a similar noise. This time, it sounded like there was something in the trees. There was some commotion going on above me. I grabbed my flashlight and looked outside the tent. I didn't see anything at first, so I shined it up into the trees, and then I see this big black winged creature with these huge red eyes just sitting in the tree. This thing had to be around 5 feet tall and was just covered in black fur and feathers. It had these skinny legs and the wings that were almost the size of its body. Now, I've never seen anything like this, and I've been in these woods since I was a little boy. It wasn't a bird, I can tell you that, and it scared the hell out of me, to say the least. I didn't make any noise or anything. I just slowly backed into my tent and zipped it up. I sat there for a few minutes just trying to wrap my head around what I had just seen. Then I hear it take off. I open the tent back up and shine my flashlight up at that same spot, and it was gone. I was half tempted just to pack my stuff up and hike out of there, but it was the middle of the night, and I didn't want to hike out in the dark. I ended up just going back to sleep after an hour of sitting there. I was just so tired I couldn't do anything else except for sleep. I didn't hear anything else that night. I got up early the next morning and prepared for the day's hike that I had planned. As soon as I start my hike, I see that same creature again land in the woods about 50 yards or so away from me. I made it barely 20 feet from my tent when this happened. I immediately stopped and took out my cell phone. I was able to take 2 pictures of this thing. The first was as soon as I got my cell phone out, I zoomed in and I got this picture. It's my first attachment in the email. It landed and was facing away from me. It looked like it reached down and grabbed a squirrel or something and was eating it. I moved just a little bit and stepped on some twigs, and it turns around and looks right at me. Now, I wish I would have had a picture of that, but I was startled to say the least. I didn't know if this thing was going to attack me. I put my hand on my sidearm. Then it lets out this very shrill and piercing scream like a bird of prey and turns back around and takes off. I was able to get this picture, which is attachment 2, as it was flying away. You can see it taking off. It was probably about 20 feet in the air when I took that photo. It flew out of that small opening in the trees that you can see in the background. So at this point, I've seen this thing twice, and I didn't want to come in contact with it. This thing can have rabies or God knows what else. I spent the next hour packing up my camp and started to hike out of there. I hated to cut my camping trip short because I need that time just to enjoy nature and to decompress. But I'm not sticking around with that thing lurking around my campsite. I haven't been back to that same area since. I found a few other spots and I haven't done another solo camping trip either. I've only camped with my friends and my brothers. Over the years, I've shown these pictures to a few of my closest friends and my brothers, but that's it. In West Virginia, there is a legend of the Mothman. I've heard you talk about it before on your channel. I can tell you that it is indeed real. There is no other explanation for what I saw in the woods that day. What other animal has large red eyes, wings, and stands 5 feet tall? Thanks for sharing my story. Let me know in the comments below what you think about that encounter. I have to say it is the most convincing encounter I've received to date, and like I've always said, if I receive pictures, I'm going to share them with you all. This next story is being told by my good friend Josh over at What Lurks Beneath. The link to his channel is below.
Let me start by saying that I'm a Christian, and things like skinwalkers and shape-shifting humans remind me of what the Bible refers to as demons. The only thing that I ever knew about demons was from movies. I remember seeing the movie The Exorcist and thinking, I don't believe that stuff really happens today. Well, that all changed with the encounter I'm going to share with you. The first time I ever heard the term skinwalker in the Val Kilmer movie Thunderheart. The natives called them Yi Nedlushi, which means literally, with it, he goes on all fours. The Navajos say, may you walk in beauty. They are the shape-shifting, man-eating monsters of Native American legend, and they are real. In Sioux, their own language means big elder brother. Now, this was during the summer of 1995. I was a youth group leader that brought a team of youth from Boulder, Colorado, to work at the mission on the Lakota Pine Ridge Reservation for a 2-week missionary experience. And man, what an experience it turned out to be. The mission compound has a well that the local natives who live close by use daily. The mission would lock its main gate in the evening, and no one was allowed during the nighttime. So, early every morning, they would come and line up outside the main gate, waiting for the gate to be unlocked to bathe and fill containers of water. Apparently, they did not have running water in their houses. We were told that some of the natives had torn out the plumbing pipes in their homes and sold them for money. Our first week at the missions went by without any real major incidents. We went around and did vacation Bible school at the local schools. Some of the youth volunteered to be candy givers at the local hospital. Others helped at the mission doing needed repairs. During this week, I befriended one of the elders of the tribe who happened to also be a Christian. We seemed to hit it off, and he liked the fact that I had read a book on the life of Chief Sitting Bull, as well as the book Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. I expressed to him how appalled I was that the army had massacred all those innocent native men. I even took to the youth group to the Wounded Knee site and prayed for our nation's repentance. Because of this, the elder asked me if I wanted to go see the initiation of the Braves doing the pole dance, a sacred ritual that no white man was ever allowed to see. Of course, I said yes to this. And on the day of the dance, we drove out to the meeting place in his old station wagon. Just before we arrived, he had me hide in the back under some blankets and informed me to stay hidden. When we arrived, I could see about 50 vehicles parked around the small area. He parked toward the back of the parking area at an angle that allowed me to see the pole and a small area of the circle between the parked vehicles. There seemed to be well over 100 people there. He exited the car and reminded me to stay low and hidden. I was able to see out the side window of the station wagon and with the blankets over my head so nobody would see me. I watched from the back of the car for what seemed to be an hour or so. I watched as the Braves did the dance around the pole. Some had their chests pierced with an animal bone tied to rawhide thongs attached to the very center pole. They began to walk backwards from the pole to rip the bone out from their own chest. I could hear the sounds of chants and the whistling the Braves were blowing. It got pretty sweltering under the blankets, and I had to raise them from time to time to get fresh air flowing. Then I saw the elder running toward the car. The look on his face told me something was not good. He quickly gets in, yells at me to stay down as he started the car, and told me we had to get out of there fast. It was not safe. Someone had seen me and reported it to the others. If caught, they probably would beat me up, if not kill me for violating this sacred right. It seemed like he had floored it because I could see dust flying into clouds behind us as we left the area. He even went faster once we got onto the blacktop road, speeding back to the mission. A few nights after the ceremony, I was awakened by a noise outside the bunkhouse. I got up to see what it was, and when I looked out the window, I saw a man standing there. He was completely naked, and his skin was as black as coal. His eyes were glowing red, and he had sharp teeth. I ran to wake up the missionary and did not want to scare the children. When I told him what I saw, he said I described what the natives call a skinwalker, which is more akin to Navajo, but specifically a evil shapeshifter. It was right after this event that things started to get weird. Our group was staying in the bunkhouse at the mission, and every night we would have a bonfire, roast marshmallows, and sing worship songs. On this particular night, about 15 of us sat around the fire when we all heard what sounded like a woman screaming. It seemed to come from the area outside of the mission compound. We all turned and looked at each other, and then somebody said, "It's just the wind." But we kept hearing it, and it sounded like it was coming from the direction of the old cemetery. Now, the cemetery is maybe 100 yards away from the bunkhouse, but outside the compound, there is only one way in and one way out. So, grabbing our flashlights, we all decided to go check it out. As we approached the cemetery, the screaming only got louder. and it sounded as if somebody was being tortured. When we pointed our flashlights in that direction, we could not see a thing. As we approached the entrance of the cemetery, the screaming ceased. We all stood there for a few seconds, not knowing what to do. And then we heard something running towards us from the other side of the cemetery. We all turned and ran back to the mission compound as fast as our legs would allow. When we got back, we told the missionaries what had happened, and they said we were probably just hearing things because it was later at night. But the next night, it happened again, and again, and the night after that. Finally, one of the missionaries said we would have to check it out. So he takes a flashlight and a Bible and walks over to the cemetery. He was gone for maybe 10 minutes when we heard him screaming. We all ran towards the cemetery, and when we got there, the missionary was lying on the ground just outside the cemetery entrance. His eyes were wide open, and he was shaking and sweating. We had asked him what had happened, and he said he saw something in the cemetery that he could not explain. He claimed it was a man, but unlike any man he had ever seen. When he described it, he informed us the man was naked and his skin was as black as coal, and claimed the man's eyes were glowing red, and that he had sharp teeth that resembled a shark. The missionary said that the man started to chase him out of the cemetery, and he could have sworn he saw it turn into a wolf man. He thought it was going to catch him and tear him in pieces. However, as soon as he got outside the cemetery, he turned back to see if it was still chasing him, and that's when it vanished or evaporated into thin air. He then tripped and fell where we found him laying. We stayed up all night, praying and trying to make sense of what had happened. The next day, we go out to the cemetery to see if there was any evidence of what the missionary had seen. There were footprints on the soft ground, but they were unlike any human footprints we had ever seen. They were more like animal prints. We also found some strange handprints on the ground and some on the tombstones. We had no idea what to make of it, but I knew that whatever the missionary and I had seen was real, and something evil. After that incident, we all became more aware of our surroundings and began to take notice that strange things were happening on the res. We would see people walking in the woods, but they would disappear when we got too close. We would hear strange noises at nighttime and see lights in the distance that would move and change shape. We began feeling like we were being watched, and we would feel scared. Now, a few days after this, we went into town to get some supplies. When we came back, the missionary told us he had talked to some elders, and they said there had been sightings of a shapeshifter on the reservation. Long story short, we ended up leaving early because we were all too frightened to stay any longer. I don't know what we would have done if we had stayed longer. I'm not sure what we would have seen or what would have happened. I will never forget that summer, and I won't forget what I saw on the Lakota reservation. I know what I saw was real, and it was something evil. I pray that I never see anything like that again.